Hello guys, my name is Deep Chiring Lecture. In this video, we are going to configure AAA based on TACACS server. Here we have got 4 devices. Here XP1, R1, AAA server as TACACS, ACS, and here switch. These 3 devices are connected to a switch, centralized switch, and there, let's verify our PC. Here is our PC. And our router console, it's over here, and our ACS console, it's over here. Let's verify the communication between these 3 devices. Let's ping from PC1 to R1. Open up command prompt. There, just ping 192.168.1.1. Yes, you can ping from XP to router 1. Let's ping from XP to AAA server, ping 192.168.1.100. It's getting successful ping. Come to router 1 and let's verify the IP address of this router. Show IP interface brief. There you can see the IP address is 192.168.1.1 assigned on fast Ethernet 0/0. Let's ping 192.168.1.2. Pinging from R1 to XP. Getting successful ping 192.168.1.100, pinging from R1 to ACS, and it's getting successful ping. Come down to ACS server. Let's ping from ACS to XP1 over here, from ACS to XP1. Ping IP 192.168.1.2. There, it's getting successful ping. Pinging from ACS to R1, ping IP 192.168.1.1. Getting successful reply again. Let's verify the services that are running in ACS. Show application status ACS. Let's verify all the services must be in running configuration, and it's done. So what we are going to do is now let's configure AAA in router. But before that, what it's going to do is, let's say, first of all, we're going to ping from this XP to R1. And then ping 192.168.1 dot. Getting successful ping. Clear the screen. Try to telnet to the router. Telnet 192.168.1.1. It's saying that password required. By default, telnet is enabled on router, but the thing is that the password is not set. Now, I'm going to enable AAA on this router, and let's verify whether it's working or not. Before even configuring AAA server, this client is not able to connect to that router, right? Let's try it again. Telnet 192.168.1.1. See, it's asking again the password. Let's go to router and verify whether our AAA feature is turned on or not. AAA question mark. By default, the AAA model is disabled and feature is disabled. Here you can only see the new model, right? If I type in the command AAA new model, after hitting this command, it enables AAA feature like AAA question mark. Here you can see the feature is turned on based on authentication, authorization, and accounting. Now, here we have enabled AAA feature, right? Now let's try to communicate to that router, and let's hit with the telnet again. Telnet 192.168.1.1. There you can see that it's asking for the username and password. We haven't defined any username in router, right? And there is no user in router as well. So what we are going to do is, let's create a user and let's verify whether it's going to work or not. Before doing that, let's just type in the username as user1 and password is user1. there it shows you that authentication is failed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create user 1 over here in the router. Username user 1, password user 1. Let's try it again. Username user 1, password user 1. It's getting logged in, right? And there you can see enable. That's showing that it's not getting into the privilege mode because there is no enabled password setup. Let's set up the enabled password. Enable password Cisco. Let's try to log into the privilege mode. Enable Cisco. There you can see. Now the thing is that it's actually getting logged in with the username that is defined in the router. It's not the username that is actually defined in the AAA server. So let us say AAA authentication and AAA authentication login. Whenever it's going to log in, it's going to log in with the default group, and the default group would be TACACS. If there is no TACACS in the network, that means it's going to log in via local database. Now this command actually says that if TACACS server is available in the network, that means it's going to actually send the information from router to the TACACS server. That means when the client is going to send the request to this router actually forwards that request to the AAA server just to verify whether that username is in that server. And if the TACACS server is not available in this network, that means it's going to use the local database as the user 1. And AAA authentication enable password default group TACACS. That means it's going to use the authentication enable from the TACACS server if the TACACS server is in the network. If the TACACS server is not available in the network, that means it's going to use local enable password. That means enable. So this one. Now let us see again. Let's try to log in. Telnet 192.168.1.1. I'm hitting from this XP to this router 1, and there you can see the TACACS and error message because this router doesn't know where is the TACACS server. We haven't defined it yet. So we can log in with the local user. See, enable, and our enable password is Cisco. We can actually log in successfully. But what if we don't want this XP to use the local database? We want this XP to use the AAA server. Let's see then. Before even doing that, we have to enable authentication between this router and this ACS. To do that, we have to type in the command TACACS host 192.168.1.100. This is the IP address of TACACS. Timeout 5 seconds, and key would be Cisco. What this command tells is if any request comes to this router, it's going to forward it to the TACACS server that has the IP address of 192.168.1.100. Time of 5 seconds. That means if the user is invalid, it's going to show AAA authentication failed in 5 seconds. Key Cisco. That means when these devices, this R1 and ACS, is going to authenticate, they're going to authenticate with this password. Now we have done the authentication from the router side. We have to go to the AAA server and assign the authentication from the ACS side. So we're going to log in from this XP to this ACS server with the help of GUI mode. That means hitting with the HTTPS protocol, port number 443. I'm going to maximize it. Let's open up Mozilla Firefox, and I'm going to hit https://192.168.1.100. This is the IP address of ACS. Default login is ACS admin, and my password is, we have actually changed the password as PA44W0RD. We are logged in, and there expand this network resources. There you can see the network devices and AAA clients. Just click it over here, and let's create the authentication between the router and the ASA. The name of the router, let's verify it. The router name is R1, so define R1 over here, and the IP address of the router, let's verify it. To show IP interface brief, the IP address of router is 1.1, define over here 192.168.1.1. Then again, we are going to use TACACS protocol, right? So click on TACACS, and our shared secret key is Cisco, that we have already defined over here. There you can see, right? This was from the R1 side authentication. Now we are defining from the ACS side authentication, and it's Cisco. If you want to see, you can just view that it's in small. Alright, now click on submit. So we have done the authentication from the ACS side as well. Now let's see, we actually use username, right? User1, and had login to the router. Let's try it again. Telnet 192.168.1.1. Try the username user1, and the password user1. There you can see authentication failed. This is what happens if TACACS server is in the network. That means we have defined a command over here. We did this command as AAA authentication login default group TACACS. If TACACS server is available in the network, you're not going to use the local until and unless TACACS server fails. So we have TACACS server in the network that is directly connected, and all the requests that is coming from the XP, the router is actually forwarding it to the AAA server. It's not using its local database. It will only use its local database if the TACACS server fails and it's not connected to the network, right? So this is what it happens. So what we are going to do is, I'm going to do ACS, and over here this is our XP. Let's create username on TACACS server, but before doing that, let's type in the command for AAA authorization and AAA accounting. Let's go to the router. AAA authorization, it would be config commands, and enter AAA authorization, and it's going to commands use 15. Privilege level default would be your group as TACACS. This is your TACACS. Our authorization commands has been done. First we have did the command as the config commands, AAA authorization config commands for the configuration mode, and AAA authorization commands, all the commands that will be taken as privilege 15 default, and it's going to actually send the request to the TACACS server. AAA accounting, and AAA accounting, it would be network, and default group would be start, stop, group TACACS. AAA accounting network default start and stop group TACACS. That means we are going to authenticate our accounting through network and through the TACACS server. Another command would be AAA accounting and exit commands shells. That means it's going to use the commands, accounting commands, 15 privilege, default, start and stop, group, TACACS. What it's going to do is, whenever we are actually typing that command from this PC, it's going to actually grab that command and send it to the TACACS server for counting purpose. We're going to deal with that later on. So these are the commands actually defined in AAA. We have defined probably 6 AAA commands to show history. First, this is the command to enable the AAA feature. We have created a user based on user 1. It's in the local database of this router. We have defined enable password. This is the local enable password. If TACACS fails, that means it's going to use this username and this enable password to get the login to this router. AAA authentication login default group TACACS local. That means whenever this PC is going to log into this router, it's going to use the TACACS. That means it's going to forward the request to the TACACS server. If the user is defined in the TACACS server and it's valid, that means it's going to get the authentication. That means it's a valid user. But if the TACACS fails and if the TACACS is not in the network, that means it's going to use the local database. That means this one. AAA authentication enable. If your TACACS server is in the network, that means it's going to use the enable password from the TACACS server. If the TACACS server is not there, that means you're going to use the enable password from the local database, and this is the local database enable password. TACACS server host 192.168.1.1 trying to authenticate from R1 to ACS. All the requests that is going to come to the R1, it's going to forward it to the ACS, and if the username is not in the AAA database, that means it's going to time out within 5 seconds or after 5 seconds. The key regarding the authentication, it's Cisco in small, and we have defined the same in the TACACS server. AAA authorization config commands, all the configuration commands we're going to authorize, and AAA authorization commands 15 default group TACACS. We are going to use all the authorization commands. It's going to be the total value of 15 privilege, and those are going to be in the group TACACS plus. AAA authentication accounting network default start stop group TACACS. We are going to deal with this later on. I'm going to show you, but before that, let's create username in TACACS server. Let's dig in. I'm going to go to the XP. We have already defined the authentication between the router and the ACS from both sides. Now we are done with the network resources. Let's create usernames. Click on users, create user. We're going to define 2 users. One user will only have the user exit mode access. He can only do like the commands as show IP interface or show running config. So I'm going to use AAA1. This would be my first user, and my password would be AAA1 for that login, AAA1 for that login. And I'm going to use the enable password separately. When this user is going to log into that router, it's going to use its own enable password like AAA1. Confirm password AAA1. Click on submit. We are done with the user 1. Let's go and create user 2. Just create, click on create. Type in AAA2. This is my another user. Type in the password AAA2. Type in another password AAA2. Confirming. Enable password. If this user is logged into that router, it's going to use enable password as AAA2, AAA2. These are 2 passwords. Click on submit. We are done with the username. Now, after creating username, just come to the policy elements. We're going to go to device administration. First of all, we are going to create shell profiles for those users. So just click on shell profile, create shell profile. Shell profile is actually used for the privilege level. When the user is going to log in, it's going to get what type of privilege, maybe privilege 15 or maybe privilege 2 or privilege 1, it depends. So here we're going to define that. So for shell profiles, I'm going to type in like A1 shell for AAA1 username. Click on common task. There you see that default privilege not in use. just click on the drop down list. We're going to use static. What is the meaning of dynamic? If you have LDAP servers, that means you can use the dynamic, but we will be using this ACS database. So our user is actually defined in this ACS database, so we are going to use the static. Value is 0. By default, this user, when it's going to log in, it's going to get the value of privilege 0, but the maximum privilege level, it can be assigned as 15. That means if this user actually has the privilege 15 password, that means this user can actually go to privilege 15 as well and will have the administrative login. But for now, when it's going to log in, by default it's going to get the privilege level of 0. Click on submit. Again, create another shell for AAA2. Create A2 shell and click on common task. By default, even this user is going to get the value of privilege 0 and maximum it's going to go till 15. Click on submit. Done with this shell profiles. Just come down to command sets. Now, what do you mean by command sets? Command set means you're going to allow what user can actually get access to. That means this AAA1, this first user is only going to run show IP interface brief and show run. We are not even going to allow that user to run the command show startup configuration. We are going to deny the user show startup configuration. That user can't even go to the global configuration mode. Let's see. Let's verify and let's set up. Click on create. Define A1 commands for AAA1 username. I'm going to add a command as show running dash config. Click on add. This user can only run the command show running config, and by default there is a command like show IP interface brief. This user can't go to global configuration mode. This user will never have access to show startup config. Let's click on submit for now. I'm going to create another command set for AAA2 user. Click on create A2 command and click on this one. Permit any command that is not in the table below. That means this user will be having 15 privilege. That means administrative level. This user can actually create, modify and delete anything that is actually done in the router. So click on submit. Done. Full access to E2 and only 2 commands access to this A1 user. So done with the command sets as well. Now come down to the access policies. There we're going to go for the default admin setup. Let's see. Click on identity. There, internal users. It has to be the internal users because we are actually using the ACS database. We're not using the LDAP server or any Active Directory username and password. So the users are actually created in this ACS. So we're going to define internal users and let it be as the default as well. I haven't done nothing over here. Just click on authorization. Let's create authorization for those users, AAA1 and AAA2. Before doing that, let's go to customize. You have to just select 2 of the options from customize conditions. Click on system username. This means we'll be adding this username is actually for the internal users. You have to add that and select this command sets for the user as well. When we are going to use shell profiles, it's going to use the command sets as well. Click on OK. Click on Save Changes. Done with the configuration for that. Now let's create policies for users. Click on Create. There, type in the username as AAA1. This is the username and status is enabled. There, when we clicked on the customize button, it was like system username, right? This tab is actually added over here. So if you haven't done that, this option will never be over here. So just check, and equals, let it be to the equals and AAA1. Why are we defining this AAA1 over here again? Let's say when the PC is going to log in with this username is actually going to be verified with the AAA server that is mentioned in the ACS database. So it has to be equal. If it's equal, that means it's going to open up or give an access to that user. Shell profile, we have defined shell profile, right? So click on select, and for AAA1 we have defined A1 shell. Just select it and click on OK. And the command sets, we have defined the command sets for AAA1 as only show running config, and by default it will be having the access of show IP interface brief. It's done. Just click on select, and A1 command only has show run config, and done with the AAA1 user profile. Just click on OK. Now click on save changes. Again, click on create and type in the username as AAA2. This is the username. Just click on system username. It's going to verify with the AAA username as well. For shell profiles, click on select and click on A2 shell. Click on OK and select the command sets. It's going to have all privileged access. That means administrative login. Click on OK. This user actually can create, delete or modify on that router. Just click on OK. Done with the two users, click on save changes. Now let's verify whether these two users can actually be logged into that router or not. So back to the client over here. Let's verify we are actually trying to get the access to this router from this PC. So IP config, the IP address of this PC is 1.2 as defined over here in the topology. Clear the screen. Telnet 192.168.1.1. Heading to the router, we have the local database username, right? Try to log in with that. User 1. Not working, right? AAA authentication failed because that request is actually going to the router, and that router is actually forwarding that request to the AAA server. And the AAA server denies that the username 1 is not defined in my database. That's why its authentication failed. Now let's try to log in with AAA1, AAA1. See, that means AAA is actually working fine, right? Let's try to get into the privilege mode, enable, and our password is AAA1 for the login. See, it's working. Show IP interface brief. There you can see the IP address, right? Let's run the command show run as well. Show running configuration. See, the run configuration command is also working fine. Only the thing is that you cannot go to global configuration mode, or you don't have access to run show startup. You can't run any command. You can only run show IP interface brief and show running configuration. Let's try to go to global configuration mode, configure terminal. So you have only access to view the IP address and to view the running configuration. You don't have access to get into the startup configuration or global configuration mode. Let's try to give the access of global configuration mode. For now, let's open up that ACS. Let's go to the command shell policy, command sets. Let's go to A1 and show startup config. Let's add this and click on submit. Now A1 can actually run show startup and show running config. Let's go to this command line interface. Now run show running config. It's working fine. Now it has the privilege to run show startup config as well. See, it's working fine. Now this user can't even have the access to the configure terminal. See, command authorization failed. conft not working fine, right? So let's add again. Go to A1, add configure terminal. Click on add, click on submit, and again go try to get an access to the configure terminal. conft. So it's working fine. The only thing is that you can only get to the access till global configuration mode, but you can't run any command such as do show IP interface brief. See, authorization field. You can't even enable EIGRP as well. Router EIGRP 100. See, until and unless you give the command router EIGRP. That means you can, if you define router EIGRP command, it can actually run the router EIGRP command. But the thing is that when you are into the EIGRP, you can't run the network command as well. So for each and every command, you have a granular access, and you can define to the user, and that user can actually get the specific commands that you have defined in ACS. Now let's come back to the command line of this PC, and let's try to log in with user AAA2 telnet 192.168.1.1 user AAA2. So we are logged into AAA2. This user will be having each and every access to all modes, right? Let's verify it. Enable, and our password is AAA2. Getting logged in. Show IP interface brief. Show run, working fine. Show startup config, working fine. Try to get the access of global configuration mode, working fine. Router EIGRP 100, working fine. Network 192.168.1.0, working fine. Exit line V device 04, working fine. So that means this router has each and every access, because we have actually defined this router. This user can actually get the privilege of 15, right? That's what we have defined in the AAA authorization part. Let's see the accounting, and here this is how you get the access, and you can define the each granular access to these users if you want to. Now let's verify the monitoring reports, that is AAA accounting. Just click on monitoring reports and launch monitoring and report viewer. See, this page only opens if you install Adobe Flash Player. If you don't install Adobe Flash Player, it's never going to show this dashboard. So what we are going to do is just click on TACACS authentication. That shows you the authentication information over here. There you can see we have user 1 login information, AAA1 login information, and AAA2 login information. If you want a detailed overview or detailed information of that user login, just click on this details. Over here, you can actually get the details information. Here you can see the status 1, and come down a little bit. There you cannot use the scroller, so just scroll down. Just hold this scroller and hold down. See the remote address, that means you're logged in via this PC. The IP address of 192.168.1.2 is for this PC. The username is AAA2. This was the user that was logged in. The device you're logged into is R1, and the device IP address is 1.1. See, shell, that means A2 shell. It's identity internal user, that means the username is actually defined in the ACS server. And authorization match AAA2. Service enable, that means this was actually defined when we were typing enable password. At that time it actually captured this one. If you want a granular way of accessibility or information details, just click on reports and let's verify. Just go to AAA protocols and just click on TACACS accounting. Okay, TACACS accounting. Just click on accounting. Over there, last 30 minutes, right? I'm going to use today and click on run. There you can see the details that what user was logged in and what that user actually used that command. That means, see over here, it's showing you all the commands. Router EIGRP, when you were logged in with AAA2, it was actually having the privilege of 15, right? And you can actually even see that show run config, it was actually running show run config, what the commands were actually used. This way you can actually view and verify the access and what were the commands at that time, what was running. If you want more details, just click on this one and bear with me. Okay, there you can see that the IP address username is 888.2 and device IP address is 1.1. that means logged into the router. Privilege is 15, full privilege. The command that user actually was running is line VTY04 at that time. You can see the date and time as well over here, and the request flag was stop and more details. See, the service type is accounting, and this report can actually be generated only with the command that is you have defined over here. AAA accounting commands 15 default start stop group. If you don't define this, that means you can't get this report information. All right, so that's why I defined that one. So capture all the commands that is based upon privilege 15, and it's going to actually capture in TACACS from start point till the end point of the logged in information, right? So this is how you actually configure basic AAA server. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos. Thank you guys.